Okay, I think we're going to start here. So, leave sets for 3:30. I think it's a little past 3:30. So, welcome to our forest product industry and tourism panel here today. We're hopefully we can get some great representatives that can tell a lot about how tourism has affected their business and possibly how they've grown it. And my name is Tierney. I'm with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And I want on behalf of the state, I can say that tourism brings $2.8 billion alone to our state. And I think more and more people are utilizing tourism as a way to actually introduce their products, show their products. It introduces a lot of folks to stay here and appreciate and love here. And, and eventually some of these people move here. We need some, we're losing our population. It's a great way for us to highlight our state in so many different ways. But I do want to make some introductions here to the folks that we have on our panel. Here we have April LeMay, and the seats they've given us are just way too comfortable, by the way, right? So,
and low.
And we have Joe Short from the Northern Forest Center, and Charlie Shackleton from Bridgewater, Vermont. And we're going to give an opportunity for each of them to introduce what their businesses are, where they're from, and then we'll go into more detail, I think. We'll go one by one. How's that sound?
Sure. So just to highlight, I'm April. I own April's Maple. We're in Canaan, Vermont. So if you guys haven't had the opportunity to go up there, we welcome you all to come in. We're solidly in the middle of nowhere, which in speaking to a bunch of Vermonters, I can even say we're still in the middle of nowhere. So we're on the border of Canada and New Hampshire. And at April's Maple, we make maple syrup. We make maple products, but we also provide a customer experience to capitalize on some of the tourism that you're talking about.
Hi, I'm Joe Short. I'm Vice President of the Northern Forest Center. We're a nonprofit organization, and we work across the 4 northern forest states of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. And we're a regional innovation and investment organization that our mission is really focused on how do we create rural vibrancy by connecting people with the economy or connecting people, the economy, and the forest landscape, which includes automated wood heat, which we've talked about at this event before, secondary wood product manufacturing, and then what all. The reason I'm sitting in this comfy chair today is outdoor recreation.
My name is Charlie Shackleton. I came to this country about 6 years ago from Ireland and blue glass, and then started a furniture company, which I've always been passionate about. And in partnership with my wife, who's a potter, Thomas. About 10 years ago, I didn't want to be just a furniture maker. I started a thing called the Naked Table Project, which was really to connect my love of making things by hand with the forest. And so we have a little presentation about the Naked Table Project, but that's really why I'm here. And for me, it's crucial. It's about, as I said, it's about people who are primarily makers, it's about people who love the forest, and it's about people who like connecting with each other. The Naked Table Project kind of does all three.
Okay, so just have people speak up a little bit, just so that the back here.
Yeah. I think we might have them stand up during their presentation. It makes a big difference, right? But
there's a lot of seats up here.
Well, the first thing I want to bring up is we're going to actually want you to expound on what your projects are, and also in how it only not only tourism has helped you, but possibly helped your community as well. What have you noticed with the advent of tourism? But you have a great story, April.
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up in Canaan. When I was 18, I went off to college, and I had a corporate job for 17 years. And I, always had Canaan in my background. I've traveled a lot in my corporate job, but Canaan was always home. And I couldn't quite get it out of my system. And so my parents were down helping me to renovate my home in Massachusetts. And my mom was telling me they were going to have to sell family land. My grandfather was a logger, and there was 800 acres of land available for sale. And she and I were brainstorming, geez, what could somebody do with all of this land? And I think she said, I think there might be enough sugar maples. Maybe somebody would make maple syrup. And so maybe a little hesitantly and maybe not, I'm not sure. I kind of raised my hand and said, I think that I would be interested in doing that. and if I kind of forward, so in 2012, I bought this 800 acres of family land, and I started making maple syrup. And I put a building in Canaan, just very squarely, as I said, in the middle of nowhere, with the idea that I would have a retail shop. I would make maple syrup and other maple products, to be determined. And I always had in my mind that my ideal customer would be maybe somebody traveling through the area, and they would fall in love with our brand. So they would love maple syrup. They would come into our sugar house, and they would be like, wow, I get to see where it's made, and just be kind of committed to who we were. I'm very fortunate, and my business has continued to evolve, and I think it's probably not at its end state yet. But where I am right now is that, the first year we made maple syrup, we noticed that snowmobilers would get lost, and they would end up at the sugar house. They think they were on their way to Canaan, and they'd end up in the middle of, again, nowhere, as I said. And so we decided we'd put out some chili and some hot dogs. So snowmobilers would come in, watch us boil, have a cup of chili, enjoy a maple hot dog. We cook our hot dogs in maple water. Okay, it's good stuff. And so from there, I thought to myself, well, now what am I going to do? All of a sudden I had this audience to kind of, participate in April's Maple and purchase some of our products. What do I do in the summer? So my parents, my first two employees, my parents, what a wonderful experience. I said, Mom, this summer we're gonna make an ice cream stand. And she looked at me with a little bit of hesitation and doubt. And sure enough though, got right behind the idea. We built, when we stopped making syrup, we kind of built this little wooden stand next to our evaporator, because you're not using your evaporator in the summertime, where we started selling ice cream. And I was surprised. We would get groups of 20 people coming in for ice cream at a time. And there is a very large community of people that own second homes up near us. Now, I was not aware how many people that would be, but based on that kind of discovery, I created an addition. So now, what's happening at April's Maple is we have a cafe. I refuse to call it a restaurant. I never wanted to own a restaurant, but it's a maple-inspired cafe where we serve food to people, and we give them an opportunity to taste the products that we make. So, all of our food is homemade. It's, homemade rolls we make maple butter. We put maple butter on top of the rolls. So we're giving people an opportunity to come in, meet with my family, meet with me, and as a result, what they're doing is they're kind of buying into our brand, and they're saying, this place is great, I want to take some of this home with me, and I want to share it with my friends. So what started as, this piece of family land that I had really great personal attachment to, is turning into this experience that I'm sharing with people that are passing through, or people that have temporary homes, and they're buying into this family land. And so many people, I love it. They feel like they're part of kind of the foundation of our business. They understand and appreciate that they're buying from somebody local, from a small business. They know that where it was made. They know how it was made, and they know me, or they know my parents. They know my staff. And as a result, we're kind of creating this atmosphere and this experience for them kind of to share with their families and with their friends. And, I'd say continual evolution. We're not done. We're still kind of evolving what the final business model will be, but that's where we are right now.
Joseph.
I wonder if it might make more sense to hear from Charlie first. Instead of another. No, I'm not, just in terms of a business story.
Sure.
And then I can sort of talk more higher level from other states. If that's okay.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna see how this mic works here. How's that? Is that right?
There's some pictures here, which would tell the story better. That's it. Just get that to show that. So I'm not going to tell you about French. I'm going to tell you about the Naked Table Project, which was developed as a local community project to try and get people to have a hands-on experience of sustainability and how it works, and using your hands and an experience to connect people with the natural world and the forest. One of the key factors I believe, about tourism and getting people engaged and connecting those tourists to our environment, which is one of our most important things we've got, is experiential stuff. And so obviously making stuff and going out and into the woods and having something like a table, and ours is a really plain, simple table, that's a model of it, which we call the naked table because it's exposing the whole process, and taking it back into their lives in wherever they live in a city, in cubicles, that becomes a little icon of what they dream of. And so it's really very simple. I don't know how I move this forward, but probably like pressing.
Space bar.
Just hit the space bar, which is great. It's really very simple. We just take people, they sign up to make a table. We take them out into the forest and we show them where the wood was harvested, or they harvested for next year. We make a table, and then we have a dinner. This, we've done it in a number of locations. The first one it's around Bridgewater, Woodstock, Vermont. This just so happens we used one, we didn't cut this tree down. This is 600 years old in Ireland. It's actually hollow. But, so that was quite an experience doing it in Ireland.
There you go.
Oh, wow. So it's really, we bring them into the forest and we tell the story. We do the logging, we do horse-drawn logging at Billings Farm. We have a forester that's involved. It just shows the process. There's a skidder taking it out. It's transported by truck to the local sawmill. This is Richard Wright and his sawmill in White River Junction, choosing the wood and how it's going to be cut for the tables. This is just every person involved in this little circle. This is Richard Wright with his son on his right and his father on the left. I think it's like the farm is like 200 years old or something. And they've gone into sawmilling. So every part has a story. This is Dave Dugdale, apparently, and the first one we did, his mother and his son were all involved in making these tables. They do the machining of the parts. That piece we don't. And then we gather all the people to make the tables. Then here they are in our workshop making the tables. We have like 3 or 4 assistants. I don't know if I'm blocking someone's view. So it's a one day. They arrive at 9:30. We stop for lunch at 3 o'clock. And just remember, we have the parts mostly machined, but there's enough going on here that they feel very much part of it. We stop for lunch at 12 or 12:30. We go to Billings, to the Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Park, and we have a tour of the park, which is actually one of the most powerful parts we've done. This is another making event we did at Dartmouth College. This is actually taken out of the park. This is to do with the finish that we put on the tables. Vermont natural coatings from Hardwick, Vermont. So we find a natural finish that dries very quickly. And then at the end of the day, this is a couple. Very often we get couples or parents and kids who come to make a table. So they got a souvenir at the end of the day. I want to say that the walk in the forest in the middle of the day is with a forester, and it was a very simple idea. It's basically a walk in the forest with like 30 people, but it's one of the most powerful experiences. When they come back at about 3 o'clock to their table, it's just like they're looking at the table and completely with fresh eyes. The next day, we have a lunch on the local covered bridge, which is obviously made of wood, and it's a very Vermont, iconic Vermont thing. And this, we transport all the tables that are made the day before to this lunch. We then get the local farmers market to create a meal made from locally grown produce, whether it be meat and all the flowers are locally grown. And then we invite not only the table makers, but we invite the community and we invite our customers. And, amazing stories the next morning of loggers saying they'd never eaten off a table that they had actually cut down, or a kid wanting to lay the breakfast table the next morning because they were just so proud of that table. We always get an esteemed speaker. Michael was one year, Michael Snyder, and this is Peter Welch, who will talk about, generally they'll talk about something to do with the industry. That's Michael. That's Patrick Kroll, who owns Woodstock Farmers Market, who puts on the lunch. And then we've done it in local schoolhouses. And then there's obviously, this photograph is to all the sawdust goes back to the farm to use as manure. And in the old days, we don't do it so much now. There's not a shortage of maple trees, but we used to assign a small maple tree to be the
a so-called replacement tree for the one that was taken out, but it was more to tell the story. I put this in because there's Lebanon, but there's Sawmill, there's Dave Dugdale who machined the parts that came from the forest, forest, Sawmill, parts, machinist, workshops, and then Woodstock where we had the lunch. So it's a community, and they're all benefiting out of it, and they're all being paid for it. And then we also use it as a fundraiser. Next year, we're not doing one this year, but next year we're going to do a big fundraiser for Yes Tomorrow Design Build School, and everyone's going to get a bowl made by my wife. But one of the things, the reason I put this photograph in, because that was out of the Boston Globe. Of all my 30 years of making furniture, it is very hard work to get press and get people to say you're doing something extraordinary. For some reason, this project got press in the LA Times, the Boston Globe. I mean, it was just extraordinary. But I think it's because it had a cross the board appeal. People who are interested in forestry, people are interested in hiking, people are interested in making, people are interested in meeting in a Vermont village, all the sort of things you were talking about. And there's me making bread on the table, and the whole idea is it's a table. It's incredibly simple to make, and it's a place where people come to meet. It's a place where families talk to each other. Blah, blah, blah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
How do you track your audience? How do they get to you, in other words?
Well, we have a mailing list of all our customers, which is fairly substantial. And now, after the 10 years of doing it, it's got quite a reputation, and people sign up about 9 months before to make a table.
So I imagine for both of these, the word of mouth, like, I know something that you should know is very important here.
Word of mouth, as always, in my philosophy, is the most powerful form of marketing, despite what anyone else might tell you, particularly if you've got something good. But word of mouth and mailing list, and it's very much a community event, and that's when people come to that meal. It's all about community and using the local resources, meeting people, meeting each other. It's sort of a very simple idea that turned into something that hit a lot of spots.
So my question for you, Charlie, the impetus for this was basically you wanted to show the value of the whole chain.
The impetus was that I had a midlife crisis, and I thought, I don't at the age of 50, and it's like, I don't want to be just known for a furniture maker. I want to do something that has significant impact on our environment and the way people think about this planet. And that is the main reason I did it. And here I was a furniture maker, I was a maker, I knew I loved connecting people, and I knew I loved the environment, and it did that perfectly for me.
And because I'm from the Department of Economic Development, I'm going to ask the question, so what about the impact this has had on your tourism community? I mean, is it filling up hotels when it's off-season, or is it?
The most powerful impact that it has had is because of the story. And obviously that line of photographs there, it's getting the message into people's heads. I don't know, I'm sure it has filled up B&Bs. I don't know whether it certainly hasn't made tons of money for me, but it's more the story, getting it into the press and people saying, aha, there's a piece of wooden furniture that came out of a forest. And in the old days, we used to go to furniture shows, and I tell you, they thought wood was something that was made on another planet. It's like...
That's wonderful. I mean, I definitely think the exposure, I know here, our exposure with the outdoor recreation, which Joe's going to talk about, but it was also our wonderful board. Some of these members are here in this room right now. They use it as a venue to educate. Like, it's an opportunity to educate and enhance the working landscape.
Yeah, it's a great story. Next year we're doing a bare chair as opposed to naked table, but we're going to do that in Utah. Sorry, Vermont. Mainly just to shake people's heads up in the marketing world, and we're going to bring a whole lot of people to southeast Utah, which is the marketplace, and make a chair.
You mentioned a story, and I think connecting with the story is such a great theme here. And April didn't really talk about her story, but you have a story on all your products. And I don't have it memorized. I should, because I'm addicted to the maple butter. But the story to me is really something that I know it's a marketing thing, but kind of, I think, draws people in, and I don't know if you can talk about that.
So I didn't expect this when we started April's Maple. I started by wholesaling drum, making my syrup, putting it in a drum, and I would wholesale about 80% of my syrup, and I would try and retail about 20% of my syrup. And people would come in, whether they were lost or they found themselves found at April's Maple, and what I discovered was people were really interested in, why are you doing this? Like, why are you here? They were really interested in watching and participating, and we would boil, and they would come in and sit there with us. And even now, people come in and they're like, so how much have you made? Are you good? Are you good? Are we, they're very invested in how our story will continue. And so people very much like to be, why are you here? How they want to connect with you. I happen to have a corporate background, and some people identify with that as, you talked about this, why'd you do this? I had a midlife crisis. So for me, I did this. I had an early midlife crisis. I was 38, so an early midlife crisis. And I saw a way to move out of corporate America and into my hometown, rural Vermont, working with my hands. And so many people want to do that. So many people want to share in that experience, and they can't. They don't, for so many reasons. But for them to come in and feel like they're a part of it, it makes them really think, hey, I'm a part of this story too. And so they're kind of sharing in that, story. And, you talked a little bit about word of mouth. That has been the most powerful thing for us from a tourist perspective. I did have snowmobilers that would find themselves at April's Maple. You can advertise and advertise, but that's from your point of view. I had snowmobilers going on website like a snowmobiler.com or Hardcore Sledder, found this place, April's Maple. You have to go there, and all of a sudden these people are showing up. I'm like, where are you coming from? I don't know who you are. But the word of mouth is what really helped us grow from a tourist perspective, and having people connect, not being afraid to tell your story, and believing in your story enough to tell it. They want to buy in. They're looking for that connection. So
I feel like you have a secret that they can share and then tell other people.
Yes.
I know the secret. You should know about this. Somehow, because that's a very powerful
That's a nice way of saying
to
it.
tell a story.
Absolutely. That's a very nice way of saying it.
And it's a little bit about inviting these people into what is behind the curtain at the theater. It's like, this is the secret that, and then that gets them going.
And doing it with open arms, right? So, being willing to share your story,
Exactly.
Put it on a jar, put it on a bottle. I did not want to name April's Maple, because that's my name. I did not want to share my name with my product. And I worked with a couple firms and my family, and really, they're like, this makes sense. And it took me a while to kind of wrap myself around that, and to be comfortable I'm the brand, and so putting your name on your bottle, really, for me, it affects me very deeply how I think about my products. You really have to believe in what you're doing, and I think people can feel that, because my name is on every jar,
So you said 80-20 in the beginning?
Yeah.
What are you at now?
I will not wholesale any this year.
Yeah.
My first year.
So for you, this was a business model situation rather than a passion that you do on the side?
It's a melding of a business model and a passion so that I can do it. Okay, so if you look at a lot of sugar makers are also, they work on forests, they have other jobs. They're loggers, or, some of my best neighbors, or they're retired and do it for fun. And except for this year wasn't a lot of fun, but, and when I thought about it, I'm not a logger, and I don't want to be a logger. Wouldn't be a good logger. I wanted to do this all the time. And so I wasn't aware when I first got into the business, of how I would make that happen. But after, a year of selling wholesale and looking at retail, you can see the difference in profit margin. It certainly does take a lot more time, investment, hard and soft dollars to turn it into a value-added product. But the difference between the wholesale and the value-added product enables me to make my passion my business. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to exist in any sense of the word. So.
I wanted to say something that
Yeah.
will tie you in a little bit, is that I have noticed that a lot of, successful Vermont businesses, it's all sort of dreamy and maple syrup and furniture and blah, blah, blah. But very often if you speak to the owner, they have actually quite a sophisticated knowledge of business, which sounds like you might have. Ben and Jerry's obviously were no idiots when it came to that. And so there's more behind the scenes, and they never mind being asked. So if you're trying to figure out, to develop a business, go in there and ask the owner what experience. But these guys have given us, and Dave Redmond, who I met at one of these events, has given us a huge amount of help with our business, and they have a consulting arm of what they do. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. And yeah, I wanted to I have the benefit of, we work regionally with, hundreds of different types of businesses, all of whom I think are working on this topic. So I thought it would be good to hear from, two really good business stories first, because what I wanted to share is a little bit more of a macro level, regional take on some of this, and then also just a selection of kind of my musings on this theme of how do we turn what is a really significant business and industry of outdoor recreation, how do we do a better job of connecting that to direct benefit to forest businesses like these two and to forest landowners. And sometimes that's an easy connection, and I think other times it's a lot more challenging. So again, we at the Northern Forest Center care about both outdoor recreation and forest products. And outdoor recreation and tourism has been one of the sectors that has grown continuously over the last 3 or 4 decades, when I think most of us know the forest products industry has been more challenged. So it is a key part of the region's economy. And I brought a couple slides of numbers, which we ourselves, I put these together for a regional conference we hosted on outdoor recreation back in the fall. But just goes to show, these are state-by-state numbers from the Outdoor Industry Association. There's a lot of people doing outdoor recreation, and they spend a lot of money. It also supports a lot of jobs. But I think really what we're focusing on is that $5.5 billion in Vermont. Where is that flowing, and where are the opportunities for some of that to flow more directly to the people who are using and stewarding the forested landscape that economy depends on. These are some more Vermont-specific numbers from the Vermont Trail System, which was mentioned earlier. Again, 15 million in new sales over there, an estimate of 30.8 million. So I think you're all here because you know this, but I just wanted to share some of those specific numbers and make the point. This is a very big business in Vermont, and it's absolutely right for the forest sector to be thinking about how we can tap into that. So as I thought about how we answer this question of, how does this turn into direct benefit for the Vermont forest industry, I came up with 3 things. And the first panel today actually hit on a lot of these, so hopefully I'll be adding some color and not too much redundancy. But first is to connect these visitors with direct opportunities to spend their money, on businesses that tie specifically to the forest, as these 2 businesses have done. Second, which was talked a lot about earlier, is the educational opportunity and the storytelling opportunity of reaching people who are coming here for recreation and taking advantage of that. I mean, Charlie, I thought, hit it perfectly in saying over in Oxford and Coos County. They also do the Northwoods Gravel Grind. That's the bike race. This depends, this gets complicated, but they have, as I understand it, their landowner liability law does allow for some, fee generation for non-commercial uses. But as was alluded to this morning, and there are others in this room who can speak to this much better, I think you cannot, you lose your landowner liability the second you start charging for access for recreational use. I think commercial use can also trigger Act 250 potentially as well. So there are some challenges there that I think are going to continue to be important ones to think about, given the dependence of this critical economic sector on private lands. and I think are going to be really essential to addressing this issue of can we find ways for forest landowners themselves to derive more direct economic benefit from making their land available for recreation. And with that, I want to acknowledge there is, I think, tension in some places around the region about the role of recreation in forests that are managed primarily for other values, and we should acknowledge that. But also recognize that recreation is here, it is big, it is growing, and it's a really important constituency. I think it's great to focus a session on this. It's a really important constituency to figure out how we tap into. And I agree with the comment, this notion of storytelling is already, I think, kind of a theme. And also connecting this to some of our other bigger needs, like using those same stories to attract new residents and workforce, which is another way that this could potentially benefit the industry. So, Tim, I'll quit there, but just a selection of things from around the region.
Well, thank you, Joe, so much for all that. And does anyone have any questions for anyone here?
Current use covers agriculture and forestry. I don't think it covers recreation. And I wonder, has that been explored as a lobbying effort?
So in Vermont, it's not the case. In other states, they do have a version of current use where people can actually receive some kind of tax incentive for allowing public recreation on private land. And I think it's being talked about, being formulated here, and how you can measure it and possibly open up that box to do so. I mean, I think that continuing talk, there's some people I probably could talk to better. I think Matt Langlis, possibly, or Mike Snyder, Commissioner Forest Parks, the official voice. What do you think, Mike, about that topic?
Tim's right. It has come up. It does exist in other ways, in limited ways in other places, but it does not currently exist as like this quid pro quo. You allow recreation, you get this benefit. That said, as Matt can tell you as a county forester, it's in the forest plans, it's compatible, it's not a problem. And Tim's right also that this has been raised through the VOREC initiative. We got a lot of people suggesting this. And I would just say it's not that easy of just saying, oh, we didn't think of that, let's flip that switch. I'm sure. There's no, it's expensive to run this program, to make towns harmless, hold towns harmless for the property tax payments. That has to come from somewhere. There's nowhere to really add value with current use. There's a possibility to take value away, as in if you post your land and you don't let people, maybe you get less of a current use benefit. And that's probably the only model that seems like practically and economically workable, and I'm not sure there's a lot of political will to do that. That's actually the short version.
Just to follow up on that, Mike, but I never thought of this just now, but
Pretty sure I have to go.
But parts of the land that's in current use, for example, one of the trails on the trail thing that goes through a parcel in current use. That parcel is in current use. There's a trail that's being ridden on, and that trail rider had to pay a trail fee for a pass, maybe. That doesn't preclude the landowner's ability to enroll in current use, does it?
No.
So in a way, it's not like it's layering values, right? So you take things that are not mutually exclusive and you add them together, and that'll create more value to it.
I agree. That's why we say, we just like wildlife habitat per se is not part of the current use requirements, but we know that forest management is connected. Similarly, water quality. So it's all in the mix. It's just forestry and agriculture are the purposes, and we feel lucky that forestry, as we said, is consistent with all these other purposes. It's just the issue is just that can you add another benefit, and that's challenging, just practically speaking right now. I want to be clear. There is one that is that you can't like lease hunting grounds and be in current use. That would query your eligibility.
Joe, you had mentioned that under certain conditions, Act 250 might be triggered. What kind of a scenario would trigger?
I mean, again, there are others in the room who are experts on this, but I think if it's is it 10 acres and
10 acres of disturbance.
Yeah. If, for example, there's a trail network that was on land that large that wanted to charge, it would trigger.
It's linear too. It's a linear foot acreage. acreage for a trail?
Probably about 8 miles of, say, a 12-foot treadway would trigger it.
But only if you're deriving income from that.
I think also it would depend on whether it's impervious or not.
But a big part, sorry, just to jump in here, but isn't it the difference being that being part of the Vermont trail system, it's for municipal goods, so your trigger goes higher in terms of the acreage.
Very much so.
And if you're not part of that, then the trigger is much lower.
And it also has to, there's a lot here. So
1 acre.
Kevin is right. It's also, there's another caveat, which is, are you in a zoning town or not? It's different if you don't have zoning in your town. And last thing I would say is this whole topic of how are recreational trails considered under Act 250 and regulated is part of, we are trying to make it part of the legislature's look at modernizing Act 250. We've made proposals to change that. It's not going that great, but we're still working, right?
Definitely.
So I guess tagging on maybe to what the Commissioner was saying, coming at this from a landowner perspective, I work for Weyerhaeuser. We own and manage 86,000 acres up in Northeast Kingdom and about 10 times that in Maine. And so, look, you showed, Joe, like, you talked about the ability for landowners from things like the rally or this gravel grind to have income. But that actually isn't going to landowners. That income is maybe going to the entity, the North Maine Woods, which they are a nonprofit. They actually do not make any money. Their money goes back into just managing gates to manage access. So landowners don't get any money for roads. They don't get any money from that. But it is a way to help manage who's using the land and how they're using it. Historically, especially in Maine, the recreational, sort of traditional recreation, so you had people hunting and fishing, you had people that sort of understood the working forest and what was going on there, and they were advocates. And you know, what Mike's talking about, there's very few advocates for the forest industry anymore. It seems like, you know, whether that industry is more widely defined, I guess, now. But so when things come up, like Act 250 and modernizing it, you're kind of this lone voice. And what I've seen that's encouraging is the recreation side of this equation now has actually been talking with the industry, talking with the foresters, talking with the landowners and saying, okay, recognizing like how do we add some value? And some of that might just be advocacy, just going back to that tradition of more voices asking for the same thing, you know, policy that helps to have long-term forest management, policy that, you know, whether it's tax programs or current use, which is super important to most forest landowners, or being a voice, you know, saying how can we help with making sure the changes that happen are positive for the industry. So I see that starting. It's just a lot of times I feel like we're a little bit behind the ball, you know, that the policy's already getting ahead of where we're quite at with, you know, with these kind of sessions.
And that's something I kind of want to bring up as the facilitator here. So I think a lot of times it's in a shift, and I think Joe kind of alluded to this, the fact that, you know, there has been, let's say, a decline in the mills that in the northern forest, so to speak. But actually the transfer to the fact that they might have to depend on people from away, I think has been a challenge for a lot of folks, and actually open themselves up to the potential of tourism. I think up in your neck of the woods up in Canaan, I don't know how that is looked upon, but so I don't know if I could talk about that. Like, have other people notice what's happening with you, and you see them opening up more?
So it's a great point, and we talked about this in the earlier session about education and how do you get kids involved. You know, we're a small town. We used to be a factory town. Ethan Allen had a plant in Canaan, Beach Falls, and so we were a working town. The population, when Allen started shuttering stores and closed its locations up in Canaan, a lot of that working population left. So a lot of the tax bases left. It's affected the school systems, and it's deeply affected the community. And when I was graduating high school, it was always a saying: are you going to BFU or college somewhere else? Beecher Falls University, which was Ethan Allen Factory. Are you going to go work at the factory after, or are you going to college somewhere else? And so with the shuttering of the doors of a factory plant, the town has been in a kind of in the middle somewhere, figuring out kind of how do you define yourself as a town, because we were a working town. And so April's Maple has been one of the examples that I've seen people, using to say, this is a reason to come back. So, okay, so maybe there is no VFU, there's no Beecher Falls University for you to go to, but there are jobs now, we need people working in the woods. We have a series of, logging companies and some other, forest-related businesses. So that's kind of one way it's affected it, saying, hey, you could work here now, you could work in this industry now, or, you can go somewhere else and you can come back and then redefine yourself as somebody that in working lands business. So, there's more than one way to do it. It might not be through going through to the mill, but it is actually, get a job in the woods or go away and come back and do something. So that's been an example of how, starting a small business in a town where there aren't small businesses or large businesses. There really aren't a lot of businesses in Canaan. So it's a really kind of cool way to see it, and then to see what's happened in Burke and to think about kind of tourism, talking about all the connected points and how do you continue to, evolve Canaan as one other small town in Vermont story to include more opportunities to bring tourism in. So more ways to use working lands in that regard is a conversation that a lot of the townsfolk are having, because they want to give kids a reason to come back or to stay. And that is kind of this, people are starting to grasp for it and reach for it and haven't figured out necessarily what it means or how to do it, but it's one way to say, geez, is this an opportunity to give our kids a reason to come back? Or maybe they don't leave. Can we rely on tourism? Can we build businesses around the idea to get more people to come through? So that's how it kind of affects April's Maple and more the town more broadly. Yeah.
I have a question about how does the recreation aspect and the tourism consistent with traditional uses, hunting? I mean, part of the health of the forest has relied on people hunt and sort of managing wildlife through hunting. And where does that part of our tourism economy fit in this picture, or is there a tension there, or?
I'll tell you from a landowner who, I have 800 acres of land that is known for, we have good hunting land. I do have people that request, access for hunting, and so it has not been a tension for me. I don't know that that's reflective of everybody else. Because, I'm very transparent about it, about, places people can go and timing of when they can be there, and what it means to be a part of April's Maple. Now, I'm relying on people to come to me and, ask permission, just from an education and awareness perspective. I haven't had that tension yet. I don't know that that's probably one of the, down the line, it could be an issue. But, I'm also on the border of New Hampshire. Pittsburgh, New Hampshire is very well known for fishing and hunting, so, but it's also known for outdoor recreation, motorized and non. So, the way it's been managed is separation and awareness and signage is how it's been managed. I don't know that works going forward.
And is the state promoting hunting, I guess, is part of that question?
Oh, yes.
I think so.
Fish and Wildlife Department, yes, of course.
It's interesting. We have a wood products factory in Dorset, Vermont, 75 years now. We have a retail store, and I would argue if recreation wasn't around, our store probably wouldn't be around, because when people ski at Brownlee and Stratton and Magic and and Mount Snow, when you have a bad day, what do? They come to our store. And so what have we done to try to bridge gaps? We host our local farmers market during the winter months in our factory, which is we do it because we want to do it for the community. We think it's the right thing to do. But I'd be lying to you if I don't tell you that we do it because we bring, whatever it is, 300, 400, 500 people through our store every single day. And so bridging that gap. What I haven't done, which Charlie got me thinking about, is I've got all these people there. Why the heck am I not taking them out on a snowshoe right on the mountain right behind us and connecting those dots for them? Because it's amazing how many of them are in our factory and have no idea about the story of the wood, why forestry is good and things like that. I think that
piece of it is, I mean, I applaud you for doing the, because it's a passion on the environmental side, but I think the other part is, economically, we struggle like everybody else, and I'll be the first one to tell you, we're looking to make money as well, but we can do it by telling the right story, which is also a really great story. I think that's the great, and so I love this idea of because let's face it, buying a wood product isn't as emotionally connected as skiing in our, on our trails in our woods, hiking in our mountains, going bird watching, all these other great things. So if we can get them excited about that, connect it to what then we do, it's a pretty compelling thing. And I think it's great.
Well, I was laughing about our bad chair in southeastern Utah. I'm on a board, and they want to look into this design center. And I said, I'll do a pilot project. I'll go and make a chair for a week. Well, I thought it was in the middle of the desert. I hadn't a clue where Bluff, Utah was or what it was. I just got a plane. And but it turns out it's the most astonishing scenery, has the most incredible Pueblo history. And what we're going to do is, they're going to make a chair, and they're going to pay for making a chair, but we are going to, my wife will run a watercolor course. We found an archaeologist to teach all about the Pueblo history there. There's obviously the national, the big sandstone national, Monument Valley. It's just incredible. So the chair will really be just a takeaway from a whole week, and of course food and lodging and all that sort of thing. The chair will just be a little memory stick of hopefully a wonderful week there.
I'm curious about, and maybe you can just point me in the right direction, but where businesses that are located in the middle of nowhere, how they can access both, well, what are some of the strategies? It sounds like word of mouth and just happening to be where you are has worked out for you, but I'm curious about how, what strategies can be effective beyond that for drawing people to where you are, because our rural economy is very hard, for developing businesses, but also how can you get the data on who's going by your door? How do you know what kind of price points you're hitting? And I mean, I've heard a lot about what's these trending experiences, but the ones that get a lot of attention are a little more odd than what the two of you are doing. Like taste urban moonshine spirits, and or sit and look at an alpaca, like random things. Like there's a lot of that that's happening that is trending right now. And I see that as opportunity for people throughout rural Vermont to be able to draw people to their land, but I'm curious what the strategies are for that. And if there's anyone in this room who's doing something kind of odd, I'd love to know.
I'll tell you, I do use the Vermont Maple Association. So it's similar businesses, and people look to associations if they're planning, trips and things. So that's one way that I found to be helpful in getting our word out, is by kind of leveraging some of those infrastructures that exist. And social media has been tremendously helpful for us. It goes on your foundation. You have to be noticed, though.
Right.
And so, so when people come in, when I first started, I would let them sign a book, and they would sign a book, and they would put their name and their email address, and then I would show them where my page is, and then you got to go there once. I mean, once you like the page, you start getting notifications and updates, and it starts small, but that has had a personal effect on me over time. I mean, I'm not a social media expert by any means, but I know it's worked. So those are two strategies I've employed, is kind of using those other groups, people that look like me, join in, because there's some free publicity and marketing that goes with that. And then there's also an associated quality standard that goes with being part of the Vermont Maple Sugars Association. And then leveraging social media and email by opt-in services, and kind of just capturing, hey, leave your name, because it's very comforting, right? Oh, I'll just leave my email address, and then you're on my mailing list. So that works for me.
Can I just, there's one thing that a lot of these businesses have in common other than the brand Vermont. It's not the word, it's the essence of the brand. I know your business really well. Authenticity of Vermont is there because of you. I mean, it connects with Vermont. It's seated in there someplace. Whether it was done consciously or not, it permeates the brand. These two, the same thing. Other businesses like Hill Farmstead Brewery. It's authentic, it's Vermont, it's high quality. They all seem to have certain characteristics that are similar, And if you're looking at a business, one of the first things, and I did the same thing, is how Vermontian am I? In terms of, I'm not talking about flannel shirts, I'm talking about the quality of what Vermont stands for deep down inside, and starting from there and trying to project out into social networks and affinity groups and stuff. It really starts with a brand essence, and a lot of times that, for these businesses, has a real Vermont feel.
Except that, you go, like Karina was saying, sometimes weird stuff takes off. Who would have thought you'd be selling ice cream, out of a bathtub in Burlington, or selling teddy bears? Neither of those are obvious. And I was going to say one thing in listening to April. If you're an entrepreneur and you're having a bad day, I have a new philosophy is that generally, most days, if you're open to it, and I heard April say this, get ready to be surprised. Look out for the surprises, because and even if it's here today, who you meet, or hot dogs are selling really well with maple syrup, watch for those and listen really carefully, and talk to your customers, because they will tell you everything you need to know. And if you're open to being surprised just once a day, I guarantee you there's always a tip for your next move. I'm sure it sounds like you were kind of surprised by the whole
Absolutely.
thing. Don't have a dogged business plan, which they'll all tell you. And just stick to it and don't listen to anyone. It doesn't work. And most business people look at financials. They're not looking at the financials necessarily. They're looking for the odd spots out on that page and saying, what's going on right there? Why are we selling fridge magnets like crazy when we're meant to be selling furniture? There may be a message right there.
On the question of getting people to remote places, I would agree with social media is important. I'd also say events or some community events, and there are some. I don't know if you get any. I'm sure you get Island Pond traffic. So they have this ladies' night coming up, or ladies' weekend, and talk about weird. they have like drag queen bingo, drag queen story hour. They have like a Chippendales group coming in. I don't know exactly how to really
Very Vermont.
It's very Vermont, but I agree with Charlie's point. It's this kind of, the weird stuff is what kind of can catch fire on social media. And I think savvy businesses are thinking about how do we connect, is there an opportunity to connect to that event? I remember hearing at your meeting, Aaron, and maybe they're your cutting boards, John, but really highfalutin cheese event. Bringing people in, but look at the cutting board that's under it. I think sort of thinking creatively about events, things that are drawing people in, and where are there opportunities to get, again, both to tell stories, but to use those venues to get product in front of people.
Last week there was an event here, Rastratista, which means Sea of Mud, and it's a gravel race in the middle of April. Terrible conditions last week, I heard, right? And 40 degrees and rain, I think, and 1,400 people signed up in a week for that, and they all showed up here and talked about a great thing for the local economy, right?
And cyclists have incredible disposable income. It's probably you guys must speak to. So how do we tie into that in the wood products sector? You're getting these groups here. People that go skiing, they have money that is just ready to be planted into our economy here. And so how do we connect to those groups better? And I think that's the drew me to this discussion is I think we're missing the obvious connection, but having to think really creatively about how you do make these not forced connections but more natural connections. Ski in the morning. What if you're ski in the morning and then our last run goes through the woods and you get a little talk in the woods and then you show up to do the naked table. Things like that. So it doesn't seem quite as forced, I guess.
Neat example that just popped into my mind is Millinocket, Maine, quintessential mill town, home of Great Northern. They started the Millinocket Marathon a couple years ago in December. It's free. You don't have to register, but they ask people, instead of registering, spend that money in local businesses. And they've gotten a couple thousand people up there. They run it on logging roads. There's guys who run it with chainsaws on their shoulder. The finish line is between two log trucks. So that's just another neat example, and it works. People they may not care about all that, but they care about running, and they want to do something crazy, like go run a marathon in December in northern Maine. And it's worked as a way to kind of connect people both to the forest, but also to that community and its history.
Matt Jepson?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to get to your point of creating that connection, I don't know, those signs that Human Trails had, there was some fine language in there, and it's in that language was getting at exactly what you're talking about, which was when the bike rider is in the forest at the logging operation, they're actually learning there that firewood from that harvest is available to them at Eastburg Market. And they could, the fire that's going to heat their campfire that night came from that location. And it's just creating those connections. Also, you know, the wood from that job went to this sugar house, and they can go and get maple from that local sugar house. So, you know, it's a very simple project, but it's simply trying to make those connections as to what they're seeing in the woods and how that can translate to how they can help further our rural economy.
So Charlie, I have a question for you, because before you started the Naked Table, you have this furniture business located on our most famous speed trap in Vermont, right? Bridgewater.
That's how we make all our money.
But how was tourism? I mean, how did recreation and tourism, or just tourism, I mean, had to be a big factor in that business before this programming event. And I don't know if you could touch on that as well. Or didn't.
Well, we're in a similar boat, clearly, can I? Is selling furniture and connecting to tourism. Obviously, you're getting people from out of state at a very basic level. They're looking for something iconic to bring home, because most of them are actually dreaming of living in Vermont, but there's no way they can afford to. So if they can take back something that's not only wooden, but that they can use, or something that's Vermont, maple syrup or pottery, that's a key factor. You know, you say we're on Route 4 or whatever, but you've got to be in an exposed, you've got to have some exposure, I guess.
Doing 25 miles an hour, which helps. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And get a free dining table. Yeah. We'll pay your ticket if you... It'd be actually a pretty good deal. I mean, I was very connected to Simon Pearce. I came over with Simon Pearce to Glasgow, and he sold my furniture for 15 years. That was a huge boost for us in terms of our reputation. Now, we were making quality furniture, and it was worth it. And so when we went out on our own, we had a loyal following. But we give tours is a big thing, you know. And if you can get them inside and show them around, they get involved in your story. So, Liz?
I have sort of a big picture question about tourism, both in Vermont and New England. Are people spending more money here on tourism? Is that a growing industry? Is it something that we as states kind of have to fight really hard to keep people coming here? Are we competing with each other? Like, are Vermont and Maine, sorry, New Hampshire, like, are they fighting over the same people for tourism? I'm just curious about, like, what our long-term outlook is on bringing that money into our states.
I mean, I do know the $2.8 billion that comes in for tourism. I want to say, and Mike might know this figure, I think $1.2 billion is just the ski industry alone. I'm pretty sure, right? So they do a good job of marketing themselves there. But it has been going up every time they do a survey that tourism has become a larger role. But we're talking, you know, you're boating on Lake Champlain, to the hunting, fishing, and all around the state, to the mountain biking scene that's growing. It doesn't matter the wildlife watching, the byways that people drive up and down. I mean, so it's, and obviously foliage, which that's Mike's department, painting the leaves in the fall, right? But I don't even know what the figure for that is. Do you have a number for that? Just the tourism?
$450 million during the foliage season in 2011, the last analysis.
So is it going up?
Yeah, probably 500 million.
So it's going up, the trend is up.
Yeah, I mean, it's tied to the overall health of the economy, but I know in recent years, I mean, it's just been nationally and in all of our states growing in leaps and bounds. And you have the unfortunate, you know, we all know examples of where it's tipping into heavy use, you know, overuse. In New Hampshire, Franconia Notch is a parking lot, you know, on weekends, you know, cars parked along the side of an interstate highway. You all have your spots, you see that here and in the Adirondacks. I mean, one thing we, at the center, we talk less about tourism lately and more about destination development to sort of get it out, because it's not just about attracting hordes and hordes and hordes of people. You know, the more. The way I think connection connects tourism connects to community development is this idea that if you're building experiences and quality of life and interesting businesses that appeal to visitors, they're also going to appeal to residents. So think of it not necessarily as this all-out pursuit to get as many people as possible, but to build quality experiences and places that, yes, visitors want to come to. But don't just think about it solely for the sake of visitors. Think about it for the people who live in those communities or who might live in those communities.
Another quick point of data for Liz. Vermont State Parks visitation has increased 40% in the last 10 years.
With the same number, okay.
We've increased, this is my time as commissioner, we've added 4 parks, 3 parks. So basically the same. From 52 to 55 developed parks, 40% increase in visitation. 630,000 of us, we had over 1 million visitors to the parks last year.
Well, it's kind of that, what you just said about destinations and being, focusing on development that's for the people that live there and for other people too is, I think, one of the most powerful ways to think about the work that all of us do, whether it's in outdoor recreation or the forest industry or agriculture. Like, people are coming and doing those things not because they're like, we want to be tourists. We love being tourists. They're like connecting to a local experience, which I think all of you have brought up. And I just find that to be a really sort of exciting intersection.
I mean, there's one big elephant in the room at the moment, which is the decline in retail stores, and thanks to Amazon primarily. So we're all having to think pretty fast about what can we do that is totally unique, that cannot be bought in an Amazon store. Because otherwise, I mean, unless you sell in an Amazon store, you're going to have to come up with something, whether it be experiential or totally unique, something, if it is handmade or produced from the local woods and can't be done anywhere else, you've got to emphasize that. And it's great because it's to do with individuality. And we all like that.
Well, time back into that recreation, made me think of this.
What are our hours of our store? Oh, they're open when the prime spots to recreate are. What the hell are we doing? Why isn't our store open later and then stay open until 7 o'clock so I capture the person coming off the mountain to do it? I mean, that's sort of a takeaway on mine here, thinking about it. Because then that benefits, our store continues, which benefits your local community and so forth and so on. Because that is I think it's about community. It's not just about trying to get money out of tourists to make us stronger. But if we can, if we're there for our community, because I worry about that type of thing. So more stores closing or more companies closing and all that sort of thing. And that's, as much as anything, should be one of the goals, is that you make the community stronger, because then more people can come to live here. I mean, it just, it carries itself forward.
Sounds like you need to start a bar.
Oh, what's that?
I said, sounds like you need to start a bar.
Yeah. But we've talked about things like that. Because I'm like, it's got to change. You have to change. You have to evolve. And it's a great idea.
It works at Cabot, right? The hardware store has the taps now, and it's
a great bar for snowmobiling.
Yeah.
And I've done it.
So does anyone else have any other questions?
To that point about community, I'm curious, April and Charlie and Joe, towns you might have worked in, were there any things that your community did that really helped you? Or were there any things conversely that the community had going that hurt you, that were challenges that you had to either work with them to change? Or, and this could be anything from like zoning to partnerships forming, just like tying into that whole idea of like, it's not just the business, it's the community, and one kind of on the other.
My community was incredibly supportive of everything we were doing, and it was really important to me at a time that was critical. So when you're starting a business and there are so many unknowns, and I have more direction now, I think it will continue to evolve, as I said. But just through like the local Chamber of Commerce, not the Chamber as an organization, but the members of the Chamber of Commerce that would come to the store, that had an event at our little store, but just what I found to be the most helpful that the community did was support me in a way that they encouraged people to come check it out. You know, that was, I think, one of the things that helped me the most, because there are a lot of questions when you're starting something, and maybe it was helpful that I grew up there, so I had these roots. And so people were curious partly, but also they wanted to give me a chance. And the community never held up a barrier for me. I also was able to borrow from the community, our local community loan fund. So another way that, you know, the community directly helped me is, you know, just by offering that financial support when I was starting out my business. And, you know, the community has continued to advocate for me to, you know, people that they bring, and, you know, if people have visitors, they kind of come up and bring them to visit us. So it's had a very direct impact on who we are, because I feel like the community has always believed in what we were trying to do. So I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, it's a great question. We kind of straddle two very different communities, Woodstock and Bridgewater, which is an old mill town with a lot more old Vermont ways to it, whereas Woodstock would be so-called more sophisticated and certainly have more dollars coming through. The only thing, and we sell a very expensive product, which generally would not be available to a lot of people locally. So we've been extremely, we are community people. That's our lifeblood, just emotionally, if nothing else. So just we're involved in community activities all the time, and they, you know, local people, particularly Bridgewater, they're watching very carefully to see, are you a scammer basically, or are you the real thing that actually does care? You know, it doesn't matter whether they never come into a store, but it does matter if somebody bumps into them when they're crossing the road and they say, do you know these guys, you know, there? And if that person says, no, they're good people, that is almost more powerful a message than having a glossy magazine ad. Things like, you know, people looking for bathrooms is the classic joke. We make absolutely sure, if you don't have the bathroom, that you are more polite to someone looking there for a bathroom than any other activity, because they will remember when they're in their panic that someone who's really nice to them got into a bathroom as quickly as possible. Yeah.
You pay tickets, speeding tickets, and what? You are a saint.
It's all image, right?
Joe, do you have any?
No, I mean, it's a great question, and I think these two hit on a lot of. I think there are parts of the larger Northern Forest region where, to the marketing point, where there are, you know, regions or individual communities that are doing some really good marketing work and kind of figuring out digital media marketing in particular in a way that I think really does work and help all the businesses in their regions. There are other, you know, say communities that have not cracked that nut, and, you know, for example, chambers who haven't quite gone there, and so that I can start to see being a bit of a differentiating factor. You know, I mentioned events. I mean, we know some communities are very, you know, open to events and, you know, using downtown streets for events and closing roads, and we hear of other places that aren't, you know, to the detriment, or, you know, local business owners will say that that's to their detriment. Obviously, yeah, there's permitting, you know, use of roads. It's very place specific that can make or break the suitability of a place for a forest products business. But I would say too, I mean, we see across the Northern Forest where we have a lot of these, you know, kind of legacy mill communities recognizing, I think, the opportunity for these much smaller scale businesses, you know, realizing that, you know, the days of the large paper mill, it's maybe less so in Vermont, you know, but certainly we see it in parts of New Hampshire and Maine, you know, no longer looking at the mill site as we need to attract one huge forest products business there, but thinking about really as a park, you know, they could incorporate a number of different types of businesses that connect to the forest, and also some that don't.
Just out of curiosity, I think everybody here has probably used the National Geographic hiking maps. There's one for southern Vermont that includes the Appalachian Trail, but I don't believe there's anything like that for northern Vermont.
There is a National Geographic geotourism map.
No, I'm talking about the map.
The night hiking map.
And the reason I bring that up is that I know that there are a lot of very, very beautiful and interesting trails in northern Vermont, but I don't think anybody knows about them. Northwoods has been building trails, FDR has been building trails. There's the DC line, which the maintenance trail is an equestrian trail. It's really an incredible series of views. Another example about industry, you've got the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail that has at least 3 or 4 sawmills on it. And I know they're not bringing those up. And these are little local mills that do a lot of good for that local community. Why don't we try and get a National Geographic map for northern Vermont that would include all of the state trails and the other trails that we have? We're going to get an REI in Burlington soon. And if you've ever been in an REI store, one of their big places in that store are all the maps and booklets for the area. It's like flies on honey there when you go into one of those REIs. That's a really great way to get people interested. Those maps get out. It's a lot of basically free PR. If you've got a map, a National Geographic map with the trails in that area.
I mean, it's a stellar idea, and I know there's a lot of online maps that exist out there too, mapping that world. And I think the Green Mountain Club does actually do a pretty good hiking map, or in booklet probably. But that's a great idea.
I have a question. This is a very random, completely out there question, but it's for John Blatchford. And you run a pretty big business. Why do you come to this? I see you at quite a few, industry-related conferences like this. Why do you come to these?
I don't have anything else to do. No, it's I'm new to the industry, and I'm new to Vermont. I've only been here 7 years, but I've lived in northern New England now for almost 20. One of the things that struck me about this industry was that it was siloed in some ways, and there was not as much creative thought as I thought needed to go in to try to bolster, whether it's, the logging starts it all, but then, to the secondary market. And I figured if you start to get people talking, I come away from these things every single time with some idea. I mean, I just picked up one here with what you're doing. I'm like, that's so obvious. What the hell? Why didn't I think of the fact that we should be doing a naked cutting board type program down in our area? We already have food in our thing. We host a local farm at the factory on Wednesdays and Saturdays, so we could tie in with them. We could do a hike right back up into our area to do logging. Our owner loves, but we just tie it together. So there's always something at these things that I believe through conversation probably gets us closer together. And then as the president of the Vermont Wood Works Council, the other piece that I've been pushing on is we think that the cheese industry, beer, and people like that have done such a better job than the wood products industry in trying to tell the story and to figure out how you market, which is a great historic industry in this state and across New England. So that's why I come, because it's conversations and opportunities to meet people and see that there's an opportunity and things we can collaborate on.
And there's a lot of people like you who don't show up and really appreciate your time. And anyone who's a professional who does come to these offers their advice.
No, it's great.
I don't want to clarify, Charlie, that you call this naked table. You're not naked, right? I don't want these all.
That is a secret.
The trend is viral. Yeah.
Try bad chair first.
It's
less involved. Get a t-shirt. A free t-shirt.
A free t-shirt.
Yeah, nothing else. There's no free. There's no underwear.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, it's good. Yeah, thank you all for coming here. It was really good. I think great conversation. So.